afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the return of the Tyler Werner Show after a few weeks off in between the spring semester here at Kutztown and now the summer semester. I guess if you want to call it season 2 now of the Tyler Werner Show. Coming to a radio station near you. We're here to talk Philadelphia sports and whatever else is going on, in the world of sports. Right now, obviously, the Sixers, no playoffs, obviously, and the Flyers, the NHL playoffs we're getting deep into. Flyers were ousted, in the first round of the playoffs, and, right now, it's, obviously we're coming off of Memorial Day weekend. We had, some rather interesting up and down Phillies baseball, and even somewhat historic in a bad way on one occasion. But other than that, we got the Phillies, or I'm sorry, the Eagles OTAs coming up, rookie mini camps and this and that. And actually today is the I actually saw this earlier, is the official beginning of the 100-day countdown to the NFL season. So, obviously it's, it's one of these things right now in Philadelphia sports. The question of the day is, are you counting the days to the Philadelphia Eagles season? Because, right now, obviously the Phillies, the only active team we got playing. That's how it is with the summer, obviously. Meanwhile, the Flyers off season is upon us, and the Sixers. Obviously, last week, you had the NBA draft lottery, which we'll touch on a little bit. The Sixers will have the third pick, as well as the 10th pick that they got from the New Orleans Pelicans. That whole scene was interesting in of itself when you have Dr. J, Julius Erving, thinking like, wait a minute, the Sixers, the way they announced it, the Sixers had the 10th pick, and with the way the lottery works, and how could the Sixers, having finished with the second worst record in the league, end up with the 10th pick in the draft, on the the NBA draft? How could that be possible when the way they announced it apparently confused Dr. J, and little did he realize that was the pick from the Pelicans, and the Sixers ended up with the third pick and the 10th pick. So that was a scene in of itself, really. But nevertheless, we'll I guess we'll touch on that. Obviously, a few weeks ago, the Tuesday before the NFL draft was the last time I did the show here. And, we previewed what the Eagles could possibly do and what could possibly happen with the NFL draft. And, even though it was a few weeks ago, obviously we have to touch on it today. As today's like catch-up day, I guess you could call it on the Tyler Werner Show. Definitely got things to catch up on, amongst them are the NFL draft, obviously, and what the Eagles did specifically. And a couple weeks ago as well, the Flyers, they promoted Ron Hextall to their new general manager position and made Paul Holmgren the new president of the organization. Initially, this is something we'll talk about too in the show. Initially, that had to make a lot of Flyer fans happy that Paul Holmgren will no longer be the general manager of the Flyers, and it came as a surprise to some, but that they actually did change Paul. Ed Snyder, did decide let's make Ron Hextall the new general manager, and Ron Hextall actually does have, well, obviously former Flyer goaltender, but as far as management goes, and his post playing days, he did help lead the Kings, as a higher power to the Stanley Cup championship a few years. Well, they won this 2 years ago. The LA Kings were the Stanley Cup champions, and Ron Hextall was a part of that successful season and Stanley Cup championship team. Lo and behold, it looks like the Los Angeles Kings might be heading right back to the Stanley Cup playoffs this year. as they're up 3-1 over the Chicago Blackhawks. And again, I mean, a lot of things to talk about. We'll talk about, touch a little bit on the NHL and NBA playoffs that are, definitely exciting and coming down to the wire here. And, some teams are, their season is on the line here in the NBA and NHL playoffs. And, definitely we got championships to be played for, coming up in just a matter of days. So, that's always good. I mean, obviously we don't have our Flyers or our Sixers in any of those mixes, but, we're hoping, to hopefully eventually get our teams there. It's obviously an obvious statement there. But, let's, without further ado, I mean, obviously yesterday was Memorial Day, Monday, it was Memorial Day weekend. Baseball, I mean, were you into any of the Phillies games this past week? I mean, we had yesterday, I mean, on Memorial Day itself, we had the Phillies, deliver a 9-0 beatdown on the Colorado Rockies, and to open up this series with the Rockies that continues today and tomorrow. But obviously the day before that, on Sunday, for the first time since 1978, 36 years we're talking here, the Phillies had a no-hitter game and were shut out 6-0 by the Los Angeles Dodgers. And of course, on last Friday they were shut out 2-0. Then Saturday, they get a good competitive 5-3 win. And then again, Sunday they don't hit a single ball in the entire game. And then yesterday on Memorial Day they come out and they beat the Rockies, a pretty decent team, 9-0. And I guess unfortunately what was a half-empty Citizens Bank Park, watching some of the game. And I mean, it's just the Phillies, up and down. You never know what you're going to get with the Phillies. And, right now, I mean, the NL East is not a very strong division. It's actually a pretty open division. And, I mean, the way the Phillies stand, I mean, they're, 5 games behind the Atlanta Braves leading the division. But, I mean, really, I mean, I get the sense that a lot of people are just, they're checking, they've checked out on the Phillies already. And, I think it's like they see where the season's going and, where this organization's going. And, the interest is just, it's not there as, where it used to be during this time of the year. And, I think that obviously it's a shame. And again, I mean, that goes back to my question of the day. I mean, have you checked out on the Philadelphia Phillies? I mean, is this team, are they going to, continue to sputter, and are they even going to finish the season 500? Like we expected. They're having the troubles that we expected them to have. And as I mentioned earlier, it's the 100-day countdown now to the opening day of the regular season in the NFL. Are you looking forward to that now? Because I mean, really, all we got right now is the Philadelphia Phillies as far as actual playing goes. And I guess you throw golf in there if you want to check into other sports, and because obviously the NHL and NBA playoffs are coming to an end. But then again, I mean, if Tiger Woods isn't playing, or do you even care? Since obviously I guess there's that element to it that some people. They don't want to watch golf unless Tiger Woods is in it. I don't agree with that. But, nevertheless, I mean, all we got right now is really the Philadelphia Phillies. And, I throw out the question to the people out there today. Have you checked out on the Philadelphia Phillies this season? I mean, are they just too inconsistent? And I see a half-empty Citizens Bank Park, and I'm just not sensing that the interest is there to what it once was. And quite frankly, I'm not too surprised. Just with the way the organization has been going, and they're relying on a lot of older pieces and players, and to get along here, and I just don't quite know how it's shaping up. But in other areas of the show today, again, Memorial Day weekend, we're coming off of that, but also the draft a few weeks ago. Obviously, I got to touch on that because the first round of the NFL draft was it definitely lived up to the hype. When you had Johnny Manziel in the mix there, who lo and behold at pick 22, to my surprise was still available. When it came time for the Eagles to make their first pick in the draft, Johnny Manziel was there, and the Dallas Cowboys passed on him. Some people speculated maybe they were going to pick him if he even fell that far. Some suggested, including myself, that Manziel will probably be going to the Cleveland Browns at pick number 4. And he, ironically, he did end up going to the Cleveland Browns, but not until pick number 22. Interestingly, at pick number 3, the Jacksonville Jaguars, they did go quarterback, but they went Blake Bortles. They didn't go Johnny Manziel. And I found that a little ironic too. I didn't think they were going to take a quarterback, and even if they did, maybe they would have taken. I would have thought maybe they'd take Johnny Manziel, but knowing the defensive-minded head coach that they have, and I would have thought maybe they were going to go defensive player, but they didn't, and they went Blake Bortles, and obviously the Cleveland Browns had a stockpile of draft picks, and they did some trading here and there, and with the Buffalo Bills, so the Bills could go up and get a receiver that they wanted. But when it came time for pick number 22 with the Philadelphia Eagles, the Eagles, traded down, actually, to pick number 26 to get, essentially, well, they ended up with another pick a little later on in the draft, obviously. Howie Roseman hinted himself not long before the draft that, they only have 6 draft picks, and, perhaps we want a little more than that. But, so they, at number 26, much to the surprise of everybody, they get Marcus Smith, outside linebacker out of Louisville. Again, much to the surprise of the Philadelphia Eagles fan base. And that couldn't have been made more clear when they show like the official draft party or whatever. They show via satellite or whatever, and the fans, there's like maybe like 2 fans clapping, and everybody else at this draft party is like looking at each other like who is this, and Chip Kelly tried to explain that this guy, I guess he hasn't been playing the outside linebacker position for very long, actually, and might have a very high ceiling at the position. And, in this, hybrid 3-4 defense, or, whatever they call it. But, again, it was surprising, and, many describe it as a reach, and, the Eagles reached on this, and they didn't get good value. Chip Kelly says that, he's not, that this guy, Marcus Smith, is not going to, he's not going to play every snap, even in the, and that he's going to, he's a development guy, I guess. And, definitely, controversial with a controversial first pick, that did leave many people scratching their heads. And, obviously that's, the first pick is what, definitely a lot of people base their, draft grades on, and, the rest of the draft to a lesser extent. So obviously, the Marcus Smith pick has polarized a lot of people. You can always share your thoughts on that on the Facebook page or at 610-683-4859 as we head to the first break here. And the rest of the draft, at the first pick for the draft for the Eagles, a lot of people thought, okay, either they're going to go receiver, or they're going to, maybe they'll get a cornerback or a safety, and or maybe a pass rushing nose tackle, a beast of a guy, and they ended up going with an obscure name that many had projected late in the second round, or even getting drafted in the third round, and he ended up on the Philadelphia Eagles at pick number 26 in the first round of the NFL draft. 610-683-4859 is the Tyler Werner Show. We're back right after this.
It's Telescopic Topics, a look into the world above us.
Did you know that in March 1994, 21 fragments of a comet slammed into the surface of Jupiter? Hello, I am Geert Rulens. In March 1993, astronomer Carolyn Shoemaker discovered a small object in the night sky that looked like a squashed comet. 2 months later, her team, which she forms with her husband Gene Shoemaker and their partner David Levy, received news that Shoemaker-Levy 9, the comet that they had discovered and that carries their name, would collide with the planet Jupiter. The appearance of this comet was abnormal. A typical comet has a nucleus composed of ices and rocky material, which turns directly from solid to gas and releases dust to form a halo. Solar radiation then blows this material into an elongate tail. The unique thing about this comet was that it had several of these tails. After further research, it turned out that what once was a solid comet had been broken up into 21 fragments, which were captured into orbit by Jupiter's gravitational field. These fragments followed each other like pearls on a string and crashed into the surface of Jupiter, one after the other, about a year later. The 21 collisions occurred over a period of 6 days. As collision day came closer, telescopes all over the globe were set into position to capture the spectacle. The results of the collisions were spectacular. Right after the collision of the first fragment, Nucleus A, a plume of smoke shot 2,000 miles above the clouds of Jupiter. Later, a dark spot about the size of the Earth appeared on the surface of the planet. The large scars and dark clouds on Jupiter lasted for more than a year before they slowly disappeared.
Telescopic Topics, a look into the world above us. Stay tuned to KUR for more telescopic topics, and for more information or to hear the segment again, click on the Telescopic Topics icon on the KUR website at www.kutztown.edu/KUR. Telescopic Topics is a production of the KU Physical Sciences Department and is recorded by the KU astronomy students in the studios of KUR. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Are you looking to have your very own radio show? Do you like music or talking? Come join Kutztown University's very own radio club. We meet every Tuesday from 11 to 12, and we offer a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. We hope to see you next semester.
Let's make some noise, come on!
It's 3:22 right here on the Tyler Werner Show on Kutztown Radio, talking Philadelphia sports. We got the 100-day NFL countdown beginning today to the official start of the regular season, and on this I guess summer day, if you want to call it, many people I guess considered Memorial Day weekend the start to summer. I mean, I don't know about that. It's going to cool down actually the next few days. But I beg the question. Have you checked out on the Phillies, and are you looking basically forward to the NFL season, the Eagles season in particular? That's where we're at right here. I mean, the Phillies up and down. I mean, you don't know what you're going to expect. One day, they don't hit a single ball for the first time in 36 years, and the next day they get a 9-0 win against the Colorado Rockies on Memorial Day. I don't know. I mean, but speaking of Memorial Day, I mean, welcome to share your thoughts right here, or what you did on Memorial Day. Anything special on the show as usual, and hopefully if you're driving around out there, coming home, from wherever hopefully you stay safe, and hopefully no DUIs out there like Donovan McNabb about a month ago. Well, actually, it was technically it was over the winter, but it came out obviously a month ago. But nevertheless, today on the show, I put this on the Facebook page. I wanted to introduce a new segment here on the Tyler Werner Show, and it might not do it every week, only because this is a bit of a special circumstance here. Of course I podcast this show, and we put it up on the Facebook page, facebook.com/Tyler Werner Show. I encourage you to like it and get your friends, Facebook friends, to like the page. I put every now and then I take normally I take a sample or two out of the show, a few minutes, and I put a video clip up, just for like a short little discussion. And about a month ago, of course, as the Flyers' regular season was coming to an end, I talked about how Zach Rinaldo got suspended for a hit to the head, and Mike Missinelli interviewed him, and he got Zach Rinaldo got called out by Mike Missinelli, and if you're an athlete, who has an interesting, a rough style like Zach Rinaldo, and who has the fourth highest penalty minutes player in the league, in the NHL this past season. If you get interviewed by Mike Missinelli, I mean, you're gonna get called out for something like that. Me. And I talked about this on the show about a month ago when Zach Rinaldo was in the middle of his suspension, and the Flyers were just about a week or so away from the playoffs, where taking unnecessary penalties in the NHL playoffs is just going to shoot your team in the foot, and it will probably ultimately cost you a meaningful game or goal here and there that ultimately may go on to determine the winner of the series. So again, I took a sample of that week's show, which was this talking about this interview and Zach Rinaldo's play style. I put it on the YouTube channel for the Tyler Werner Show, and I got an interesting comment on it, and I encourage you to maybe go to the YouTube channel of the show, or even the stream on the Facebook page, and click on this video, because we're going to talk about this, what was a brief comment. And the segment, by the way, is called "Let's Go to the Tape." Now that's kind of a bit of an inside joke here on the radio, because here at in 2014, we don't here at KUR, we're not like loading tapes. We're not recording physical tape copies of tapes of shows, and here in the more digitalized age of radio. In fact, maybe a more appropriate name for it would be, let's go to the tube, because it's a YouTube video. Actually, that's my YouTube channel, I guess, is my form of tapes. That's like my tape collection, I guess you could say. Because nowadays, we podcast shows, and you put them on the YouTube channel, put them on the Facebook page. That's the efficient way to do it now. We don't have collections of tapes, but inspired by some of my favorite sports radio listens, guys like Tony Bruno and Harry Mays, who coincidentally they just by being in the business for a long time, and by nature sometimes they'll say, let's go to the tape, and get the tape up of when I said this and that, and even though they haven't been using tapes for a while, but nevertheless, kind of as the segment is called here, let's go to the tape of what I said, a couple minutes of what I said about a month ago, and then I'll go to I'll speak to the comment that was basically directed at the part of this audio sample, and we'll discuss it, because I want to, I want to then, take the clip of this part of the show right now and respond, send it back as a response to see what they say. So let's go back to, about a month ago, what I said here on the Tyler Werner Show about Zach Ronaldo's play style and essentially roles in, from what I remember in my youth hockey days. I've talked about, on this show before, the Flyers play and the mentality, the grind, the rough mentality, and the tendency to get a lot of penalties and unnecessary penalties at that. And, last week, Mike Missanelli, he doesn't hold back in his interviews. He doesn't, kiss anyone's behind or whatever because they play for the Flyers or, Philadelphia or whatever. He really called out his play style, Zach Ronaldo's play style, and his tendency to get unnecessary penalties. I thought it was funny because, Zach Ronaldo says, the way he plays today is the same way he played as a kid and this and that. And, when you're a kid, though, I mean, you can't, in youth hockey and stuff like that, I mean, some of the things that, you see in the NHL, that stuff can't happen in youth hockey and fighting, unnecessary fighting. I mean, you get thrown out of the game, essentially, in youth hockey from, what I remember in my days of playing youth hockey. But, I mean, nevertheless, I mean, Zach Ronaldo, I went through the statistics of the league leaders, and he's fourth in penalty minutes as far as players are concerned. And Mike Missanelli, kind of called out how, I guess Zach Ronaldo, he tries to get other teams frustrated. He tries to egg them on and get, instigate them and get other players on the other team into trouble and get them in the penalty box, to give the Flyers a main advantage. But, I kind of look at this and, again, I look up the results and I see he's, the fourth highest penalty minutes guy in the league. And I'd say that theory, that ideology is kind of backfired, if you look at it that way. All right, so that was about a month ago I talked about on this show. And now in a couple weeks ago, between the last time I did a show here 3 weeks ago, and today's show, I got an interesting comment on this video from, I guess, somebody in Canada, because I mean the first three words in the comment are "here in Canada," so I mean automatically I'm thinking, like, is this going to be a U.S. versus Canada thing here? Like, I mean,
it's an outrage.
But anyways, I mean, the comment is, here in Canada, we're allowed to fight as kids from 9-year-old plus. You only get 2 minutes for roughing. And I mean, I just look at that, I'm thinking, well, I mean, obviously I'm talking about, the Philadelphia Flyers here, Zach Ronaldo. This is, a Philadelphia sports talk show. I mean, I never played hockey in Canada. I wouldn't know that those would be the rules up there. Like I said, I mean, in youth hockey here, from what I remember, and even the adult hockey league that I'm going to play at, where I used to play youth hockey, there's no fighting allowed. And especially as a kid, and I'm thinking, really, 9-year-old plus in Canada, you're allowed, in youth hockey, you're allowed to fight. I mean, even if that's the rule, I don't know who would, which kid's parents would advocate that in the first place, in any hockey, in any youth hockey league, whether it's, the United States, whether it's Canada, whether, you're playing hockey on Mars. I don't know who would advocate something like that in the first place. Like, if you're playing, okay, if I'm like somebody, if I'm just playing hockey with friends, at a pond, up in Canada, and, just playing like friendly hockey, are you allowed to like just get in random fights there? Would people advocate that? I mean, first of all, I don't understand. Out of all I say in this, or said here in this quote unquote tape, as I call it, or YouTube clip here, it's the full thing, 6 minutes. Why is the response to all this? Here in Canada, we are allowed to fight as kids from 9-year-old plus, or you only get 2 minutes for roughing. I mean, let me tell you. I mean, when I played youth hockey, if I dropped the gloves and got in a fight, regardless of the rule, I mean, I'm sure my parents would have been, pretty disappointed in that, as well as regardless of what the rule was, whether I was playing in Canada, where maybe that would be allowed, or whether it wouldn't be. If I was, if I'm a parent, not anytime soon, but one day I'm a parent and my kid plays hockey or something like that, and he, I'm never going to advocate for him to get in a fight. I'm, not on a moral standpoint, but just on a strategic standpoint. I continue to say that here, and with the NHL, I mean, I guess the moral standpoint of it right now is just kind of thrown out the window, because obviously it's allowed in the NHL, even though depending on the severity of some of the things that happen, which there's been some things this year that have happened in the NHL that have resulted in multi-game suspensions and that have come out of fighting and this and that. But just even on just a strategic standpoint, I mean, again, the whole thing where I'm going with this with getting in fights and trying to set some kind of a tone for the game, for an NHL hockey game. Nobody has really been able to convince me that really equates to any form of winning. And in fact, the accumulation of unnecessary penalties and getting in fights, which Zach Ronaldo is, to, the degree of being the fourth highest penalty minutes player, this past season, to me that hasn't correlated with the Flyers making a deep run in the NHL playoffs this year and perhaps landing a spot in the Stanley Cup playoffs. Or in the Stanley Cup Finals. And again, I mean, I went, you look at that list, and I looked at that list and I noticed, the Boston Bruins, who, they were eliminated in the second round of the playoffs by the Montreal Canadiens, who had who swept their opponents in the first round. The Bruins' number one record overall in the league, and the Penguins, a lot of these premier teams, they didn't have anybody on that top 40 list, and that's where I'm going with this. And, I guess how I tie this into, with the Flyers here is that, and now they got Ron Hextall as the new general manager. A couple weeks ago, Ron Hextall, I heard him getting interviewed by, of course, none other by Mike Missinelli.
Randy, how you doing, man?
Has a knack for interviewing, Flyers personnel. He interviewed Ron Hextall, and Ron Hextall said how there's some young guys on this roster, like Claude Giroux and Wayne Simmons. He named a few other. Jake Voracek, obviously, is one of the most skilled players in the Flyers roster. And then he said, I'm glad that we got these guys, and he also threw Zach Ronaldo's name in there, and I just, I kind of like shook my head, and like, what does he? I mean, I don't know what Zach Ronaldo really brings on a hockey skill standpoint to the Philadelphia Flyers organization, and I just don't understand how this constant insinuation that. Zach Ronaldo setting a tone, trying to get the other team to commit penalties, get them frustrated. I just don't understand how that fits into the picture of the Flyers being a very successful hockey team. This year I guess was a moderately successful season, if you want to call it that. I mean, I kind of mentioned this a few weeks ago. I mean, the plus is that I guess the Flyers may have found their goaltender, for the future, maybe for the next several years. They may have solved their quote unquote goaltender problem that they seem to have had the past several years, and have a pretty solid goaltender in Steve Mason and a solid backup in Ray Emery, to fill in when needed. But I mean, ultimately, the Flyers need more skill players, and that's where I go with this. I mean, not guys that are going to drop the gloves and try to set a tone and ultimately maybe earn themselves the number 4 spot on the list of top penalty minute getters in the NHL, in the league. And that's kind of where I'm going here with this this whole response here, this whole segment of let's go to the tape. And I'm going to be more than happy to send this this part of the show in response to the see if we can get some kind of discussion here. Because if I was going to coach hockey, and I was going to make this big coaching manual that I was going to give out to all my players, regardless of what level it was on, regardless of what country I was coaching in. I couldn't imagine myself putting a section in there of that book that talks about fighting and how it's going to equate to us having a successful campaign here in this hockey team. So, I mean, that's my thoughts on that. 610-683-4859. I want to hear your thoughts on all this. Right here on the Tyler Werner Show on Kutztown Radio.
I'm Trooper Bain with the Pennsylvania State Police. Crashes involving unbelted drivers and passengers continue to be a serious problem across the country. This month, state and local police officers are conducting an enforcement effort that stretches across the East Coast. Remember, driving or riding unbelted will result in a ticket from state border to state border. Buckle up, day or night.
Looking for exceptional research and fieldwork opportunities? The Chincoteague Bay Field Station is an environmental education facility located on the eastern shore of Virginia. We offer a variety of college courses each summer ranging from geology and biology to literature and marine science. For years, Kutztown University students have come to the field station to participate in cutting-edge research and gain practical experiences that help them secure a job in their field. Find out how you can get involved today at cbfieldstation.org. That's cbfieldstation.org.
Mitch, I have some bad news for you.
What's that?
I'm dropping the electronic media major.
What? Why? Now you can't be in KUR anymore.
Well, actually, anyone can join KUR, even if you aren't an electronic media major.
Really?
Yeah, anyone can join.
Even if you're a library science major?
Even if you're a library science major.
What about a nursing major?
They don't even have that here.
Oh yeah.
If you're interested in joining, just go into www.kutztown.edu/KUR for more information.
Yeah!
342 right here in the Tyler Werner Show on Kutztown Radio on this, I guess this, post-memorial weekend Tuesday, I guess if you want to call it. But, again, I mean, I just talked about, I just brought out the, Ron Hextall being promoted to new general manager and, I guess being an advocate of, Zach Ronaldo on this team. And, I guess, maybe Zach Ronaldo's not going anywhere else anytime soon as far as NHL teams are concerned. But, I'm not trying to write Ron Hextall off as the Flyers GM yet. I mean, I don't know. I mean, he had, again, I mean, he did help the Los Angeles Kings win the Stanley Cup a few years ago. And, all I'm saying is that, Ed Snyder, the owner, I mean, when they fired Peter Laviolette, after the third game this past NHL season, one of the resounding quotes that came out of that came from Ed Snyder was, when asked about, perhaps needing a fresh perspective in the organization, Ed Snyder, said, we don't need a fresh perspective and this and that. And after, a courageous guy in the media interviewer asked, do you guys maybe need after having not won a cup in almost 40 years, you guys need a fresh perspective. And so, I mean, all I'm saying is that, I just don't. Hopefully, Ed Snyder's not wagging the finger too much at Ron Hextall, and this is how we do things, and this and that, and because to some degree, I mean, I think that the way the Flyers organization runs, Ed Snyder, he's kind of like a poor man's Jerry Jones in a way, as far as owners go, and I don't know. I mean, I guess let's see what the Flyers do in the off season, and. Definitely they could benefit from using some younger, skilled players. But, whether or not that happens, I mean, I guess that remains to be seen. And, I mentioned the Flyers were ousted in a competitive 7-game series against the New York Rangers. And looks like the New York Rangers are now 1 win away from being in the Stanley Cup Finals. After shocking the Pittsburgh Penguins in round 2 of the playoffs, and they were down 3-1 to the Penguins, and the Penguins just cough up 3 straight games to the Rangers, and the Rangers, now they just got to win 1 more game, and they'll be in the Stanley Cup Finals. As the Canadiens, the Montreal Canadiens, and the Flyers the Rangers are 2 dark horse teams, I guess you could say, that are in the finals. I mean, the Canadiens, they benefited from, they swept the Tampa Bay Lightning in the first round. So when, I'm sure that helped them, in what was a long 7-game series with the Boston Bruins. And they put away what was the number 1 regular season team in the league in the Boston Bruins. And so, they met with the Rangers, and in game 1 of that Eastern Conference Final Series, of course, the Canadiens essentially lost their goaltender, who was playing very well, Carey, who is now out of they pulled him out of the game in the second period, and they've been struggling, and so I mean that might have hurt them. I mean, I had the Canadiens initially going to the finals, but after when I made predictions last week on the Facebook page, along with my NBA predictions for the Eastern and Western Conference Finals for both the NBA and NHL playoffs. So yeah, and now it looks like unless the Chicago Blackhawks pull something out here, I mean, it looks like it's going to be the Kings and the Rangers, unless either one of those teams come back from their the 3-1 deficits. So. I mean, I guess that'll be interesting. You'll have, L.A., one big city in the West meeting New York Rangers, big city in the East, I guess. Biggest city, two biggest cities, I guess you could call them, on the East and West Coast, respectively. It looks like that might be the way things are going now with the NHL playoffs. Now, of course, you go over to the NBA. I mentioned before the playoffs started how, I had the Pacers this year winning it all. And, I'm even, the way they played the first 2 series, they were pretty spotty. It's almost surprising that they even made it to the Eastern Conference Finals against the Miami Heat, the 2 seed. But Miami, they've been pretty stable throughout the playoffs. They've, their first 2 series they won pretty easily, and they, it's helped them, stockpile, I guess, extra days of rest, while the Pacers have been, spotty, and they've eked out opponents, and I think that's starting to show now, and again, that's why I kind of I picked the Heat to win it in 6, and depending on how the next game goes here, I mean, I don't know, the Heat might win it in 5 as they're up 3-1 against the Pacers. I was watching some of the game last night, and I just don't, I'm not, the way that the Pacers had been playing before, I'm not surprised that, they're just not able to, they can't put it together, and I see, LeBron, garbling up a rebound on defense, and then just slicing through, 3 Indiana Pacers players all the way down the court and then just dunking on them. I mean, Indiana's just, I don't know, they were somewhat of a pretender, I guess you could say, heading into I guess throughout the playoffs here. Even though, they were the best team in the East in the regular season in the 1 seed, they certainly aren't looking like it right now against the Pacers. And then against the Miami Heat, they're not looking like, the first seed. But then, of course, I mentioned, you go over to the West and, you got the Spurs who, just seem to be in it every year in the West, for the past decade or so. They're up 2-1 against the Oklahoma City Thunder. I believe I posted last week on the page. I had the Spurs winning in 7, and see how the rest of the series shapes up. But could be heading in that direction. And then again, I mean, essentially my NHL playoff predictions are, essentially shot, of course, because, ever since the Canadiens in Game 1, I mean, they haven't been the same for the most part after losing their goal, their main goaltender, and the LA Kings are really, after the Blackhawks have been showing, promise and signs of the Stanley Cup champion team that they were last year, surging through the first 2 rounds of the playoffs. They just, they haven't been looking the same here. So, I mean, I guess essentially, my NHL playoff predictions are shot, the way I look at it. But, nevertheless, it should make for, an interesting final series in the NHL playoffs this year, with a couple teams that maybe you didn't expect necessarily to be in there. But the theory holds up. I mean, the Kings and the Blackhawks, last year, that was the same Western Conference Series final series that you had last year. And they're, again, I mean, 2 teams that have won cups in the last several years. I mean, the Blackhawks, they won last year, and a few years before that against the Flyers, they won the cup, and the Kings 2 years ago won the cup, and the Bruins and the Penguins have been premier teams in the East for the past, several years, and they didn't make it to the finals this year, but I mean, they're still close to that mix, and it just goes to show you those organizations are doing things right, and hopefully the Flyers will hopefully progress to to something like that, because clearly, despite how unpredictable the NHL playoffs can be, there are definitely some trends here with cup winning teams and being in the mix the past several years of perhaps winning the cup again. So that's that as far as the NHL and NBA playoffs goes. Again, I mean, I mentioned the Eagles draft earlier. I talked about the first round pick. The second round pick in that draft. I mean, the Eagles, they went wide receiver. They got Jordan Matthews, who they definitely put some Eagles fans minds to ease there once they picked Jordan Matthews out of Vanderbilt. Actually a cousin of Jerry Rice, as it was mentioned. Interesting. Doesn't mean he's going to be the next Jerry Rice, but also the Eagles getting Josh Huff the next round in the draft, another wide receiver, and essentially the way I look at it, the Eagles have not necessarily been looking for a direct replacement to Deshaun Jackson. I guess. I guess that what they're doing is they're changing the way their offense is a little bit, because from what it sounds like, Macklin and Riley Cooper are both going to be more of the outside wide receivers. I mean, Jeremy Macklin obviously was, but Cooper was more of a slot guy, where it sounds more like Jordan Matthews is going to be playing in the slot, going to be their slot wide receiver. He's got some good size and speed. And Josh Huff, I mean, we'll see how maybe he'll probably be used to a lesser extent. But with the fact that I guess they're moving Cooper to the outside for the most part, essentially, where Deshaun Jackson was, or, either way, I mean, definitely this offense is going to be different. And I think that also, rings true when they brought in Darren Sproles, and essentially now, I mean, that obviously meant that they were either going to get rid of either Bryce Brown or Chris Polk, and later in the draft they traded Bryce Brown. He was the odd running back out, I guess you could say, on the Eagles roster. Traded him to Buffalo, and so now they got Chris Polk as their third string running back, it looks like. So that's yet another change. I mean, Bryce Brown more of a straight ahead back, I guess. Darren Sproles, an interesting, versatile, definitely a great screen pass player, along with LaShawn McCoy. So, I mean, not only have they, switched things up a little bit, the way they're going, the direction I guess they're going with the wide receiver position, but it looks like, if you look at it, the running back position they did a little bit too. I mean, obviously, LaShawn McCoy is, your premier starter, first string running back. But I mean, you got like a special like gadget of sorts in Darren Sproles, and you got Chris Polk, who can, be a decent power back, I think, at the third string. So, getting rid of Bryce Brown, I think, that's another change that, is a change here overall to the Eagles offense. So, that should be interesting. And then the rest of the draft, the 4th, the 5th, and the 7th round, they had 2 5th-round picks. Filling some of these, I mean, I don't know. I mean, who knows how these other guys will turn out. I mean, you never know. A couple of these guys could be gems as far as, value goes. And we may not even know, but, they get a cornerback, they get a defensive end, they get a safety, they get a nose tackle. We'll see what happens. I mean, maybe, if a couple of these guys are better than what they have now in those positions, then, consider that some success right there in the draft picks. Now, speaking of LaShawn McCoy, that I was talking about a minute ago, last week there's a story that came out, I guess, that essentially, at first the way I heard it is that LaShawn McCoy says he's the best running back in the NFL, and listening a little later, he was asked about that, whether or not he thinks he's the best back in the NFL, and I think, I think it's sort of misleading when ESPN just says on the surface, LaShawn McCoy says he's the best back in the NFL. I mean, that makes it sound like, he just came out and said that himself and wasn't asked about, whether he thinks he's the best running back in the NFL. I think that's a little bit misleading, and I think that's, that to some degree made LaShawn McCoy, look bad a little bit. But, this has been a discussion, the past week. I don't have, I mean, upon being asked whether or not he thinks he's the best running back in the NFL, I mean, over Adrian Peterson specifically, I look at this poll on an article about it on NBCSports.com, and, the poll is that who's a better running back, and, the poll is Adrian Peterson 78% to LaShawn McCoy, the rest. So it's, I think a lot of people who were not Philadelphia Eagle fans were outraged about this coming up. I mean, you look at the past several years, and Adrian Peterson has a more successful career thus far. He's a few years older than LaShawn McCoy, obviously, and I mean, that's the thing. This past season, LaShawn McCoy was the league leading rusher. He had the best, he had the best season amongst running backs, and he, according to the snap counts at Football Outsiders this past season, McCoy played almost 80% of the Eagles' snaps, while Peterson played about 65% of the snaps. And that comes to versatility and LaShawn McCoy being utilized more in the passing game a little bit, the screen passes, and definitely something that we've been talking about here, throughout the Eagles offseason and what they've been adding and what they plan on doing in the future. As far as my stance on it, I mean, I just think it depends on how you look at it. If you're basing it more off of just last season and what they did and projecting to the future, I'd say, right now at this moment, you could argue that LaShawn McCoy is a better running back than Adrian Peterson. Considering that Peterson's getting up there in age and, running backs have a shorter shelf life, while LaShawn McCoy is in his prime, right now. And, again, I mean, he could have another huge year, with Darren Sproles in the mix as well. But, I mean, again, if you go off the track record, obviously Adrian Peterson 2 years ago had, an almost historical record-setting season for yards in a season overall. But, again, I mean, I think it just depends on how you look at it. And, I know there are a lot of, Eagle haters out there that looked at this and thought, LaShawn McCoy's full of himself and this and that. And I think, well, no, I think it depends on how you look at it, whether you're basing it on right now in the future or if you're basing it on the last 5 years or whatever. And, quite frankly, if you're LaShawn McCoy coming off of that season that you had, why wouldn't he say he's the best running back in the NFL if he's asked? I mean, that's what a lot of professional athletes do. So that's that. And that'll do it for this edition of the Tyler Werner Show today. Coming back after a few weeks off, right here in the summer season. We'll be back next week, in the next several weeks to talk more Philadelphia sports.